Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Food Foundry series. I'm so excited to have Kara Nielsen with us today. Before I introduce you, Kara, let me just tell everyone a little bit about Sierra Commons. The Food Accelerator program strengthens rural food webs in ways that foster resilience, improve community health, and promote environmental sustainability. Today's Food Foundry series, which is a collaboration with Sierra Commons, presents speakers and innovators in food and hospitality, food and drink makers, entrepreneurs, food scientists, chefs, restaurateurs, and business people, both national and local, and of course, food trendologists like we have today. There's more information at sierracommons.org. Without further ado, I want to introduce food and beverage trend expert Karen Nielsen. Kara translates consumer product goods, food service, and innovation agency clients. She does trend forecasting and strategic innovation at CCD Innovation, the Sterling Rice Group, and the United Kingdom-based WGSN. Kara's background is really impressive. Former education manager at Copia Center for Wine, Food, and the Arts in Napa. And you have a master's in gastronomy from Boston University. We're going to put your website in the chat. You can find Kara at www.karanielsenfoodtrends.com. Kara, welcome today to Food Trends 101 and how food trends impact product innovation. It's such a delight to have you here.
Oh, thank you, Bonnie. I feel so honored to be a part of this today. And I love talking and helping people understand trends, which can be sort of misunderstood and sometimes not given as much importance and value as I feel they have. So I'm here to help people understand how to use trends to inform their business and to show how important they are.
And at Sierra Commons, we work with established businesses, but often new businesses. So people just entering, the food sphere and how they're going to sort through all this information. Before we jump into that, and I know you have a really great slide deck prepared, I want to just, in complete transparency, you and I know each other from the CCD, the Center for Culinary Development Innovation. And, when I was first on the Chef's Council there, that was back in the Pleistocene when food trends were driven by chefs, and then maybe a food writer latched onto it, and then maybe recipes and cookbooks and newspapers and magazines had recipes until it became sort of a full-blown, then chain restaurants latched onto it, right? We're in a different world now, aren't we?
We are, and I'll be touching on those kind of stages that trends can go through before they hit the mainstream. But thanks to social media, especially TikTok right now, and all the video content, things that are going on Instagram, the rise of the influencer, things are moving through the food sphere very quickly. And this is why it's really important, though, to understand what's the difference between a trend and a fad. And a lot of those things that we see on TikTok end up being very faddish because they just kind of cycle through. So we'll talk about that today.
Yeah. And then, just kudos to you. I remember you and I would attend the same trade shows, and I was always meticulous about going down every aisle, looking at the new products out in the lobby in those glass cases. And a week or so later, we'd all be back home and I'd read your food reports, and you found things that I, never discovered or I just didn't stumble upon. So I'm excited to hear how your sort of detective culinary mind sniffs those things out.
Well, some of it is from going to those shows again and again and again. And so you can really see what pops out. But there's also coming to a show like that equipped with an idea or a sort of a hypothesis of, hey, this is rising. I'm going to be looking out for example, new fiber claims that relate to GLP-1 users. That was something I was looking for last year at the food shows. What brands are jumping on this bandwagon and what messaging are they putting out to communicate to people? So that's partially what you come equipped with. But it's also just putting in a lot of miles at the show.
Well, and thank you for that clarification because that shows that you have that sort of ongoing, the track record and taking note and what things faded away and what things are pertinent and what do you already know from your other research that people, buyers, consumers, chefs are looking for, all that stuff. So,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Well, why don't you go ahead and share your slide deck with us? I'm so excited to see what you have here at the dawn of the year 2026. I know this will be streaming throughout the year, but it's real exciting to see here because I'm reading so many trend reports right now. So I'm
No, this is the perfect time. Lots of trend information. This is kind of trend season, as I like to call it. And I, participate. There's a article on the blog of my website about is Dubai chocolate going to last? So if people want to read about that, check that out. I had a
it's
nice conversation with a reporter, and it's just the sort of thing that comes up every year this time. So I'm glad to be here today to help people understand how to make sense of it all.
going to drive the price of pistachios up if it does.
It already has, and there's a bit
Yeah.
of a pistachio shortage. So these are real things that happen. So
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, take it away.
take it away. All right. Well, here we go. So first of all, I'm Kara Nielsen. I'm a trendologist, one of the OG trendologists. I worked for the Center for Culinary Development in the early 2000s, writing market research reports on trends using a proprietary trend methodology, and have been doing that for different agencies and clients ever since. I have a culinary background. I was a pastry chef for many years and also worked front of the house in restaurants in the San Francisco Bay Area. And also, as Mani says, I have a master's degree in gastronomy from Boston University, which is one of the first food studies degrees, advanced degrees that were available. And I was so happy to be able to go and study food at a higher level. It was a great time. And I've really put those studies of anthropology, sociology, history into my work as a trendologist. And of course, I just want to start off, let's figure out what are food trends? What are some examples of some trends, some things that have appeared in the marketplace that didn't exist before? Sriracha is a great example. And for anyone who was working in a restaurant kitchen in the Bay Area in the 90s, the only people who were using sriracha were the kitchen staff. And they'd bring it out at staff meals and they'd add sriracha to all of their food, and it just was sort of a culinary ingredient that only people in professional kitchens seem to know about. Well, that has completely changed, and I watched the explosion of sriracha move across the marketplace into big brands, places you wouldn't expect it to go. It's still playing out. These are new dumplings with sriracha, and we even have sriracha carrot hummus. So this just shows an example of how an ingredient or a flavor profile can make its way across different food categories over time and resonate with a population that recognizes it. Today,
Kara,
we're going to be
I got a little packet of sriracha with my ramen to go or no, with my pho to go the other day.
Which is a totally appropriate example. This is a Southeast Asian condiment that came up in Thai food and Vietnamese food, and you would find it in those places. But in the 90s, there weren't, pho was not all over the place, was it? I mean, you really had to go find your bowl of pho and then pronounce it correctly.
Yeah.
Um, Korean food is another great example. So, for people who've been watching this space for the last 20 years or so, Korean food really never existed in the marketplace. There weren't Korean restaurants or there weren't Korean tacos. That is all sort of a newer invention here in these last 10, 15 years. And we really watched it grow across restaurants, and now it's moved into packaged food at Trader Joe's. Look at all the different kinds of Korean food that you can get ready-made. It's moved into frozen sweets, and now we hear news stories about an H Mart, which is a large Korean grocery store, moving into different American cities. And it was started in the East Coast, so it's not from Korea, but it was a Korean store for Koreans. But now food lovers celebrate when an H Mart moves into their town. Have you gone to the one in San Francisco, Moni?
I have not, but thank you for the nudge.
There's a nudge, and there's two even bigger ones down in the South Bay, which just shows the extent of both the Korean population supporting these grocery stores, but also a diverse crowd of food lovers that are willing to go out of their way to buy traditional and hybrid Korean food.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you for that.
So when we think of like where do these trends come from, like why did Korean pop up? Why did sriracha come up? Well, this is the real key thing to understand. It's consumer needs and wants drives trends. So if you as a consumer, as a food lover, you try a bowl of pho because Monty took you out for lunch, and then you discover sriracha, and then all of a sudden you get really excited about it, you have now a need or a want for something that you didn't have before. And so there's a discovery process, but it also taps into what you or what consumers are looking for. So, for example, who would want to eat these Korean food products from Trader Joe's? Well, lots of people. People looking for convenience, people looking for a taste of home, people looking for something new to discover. So, for this person, what needs or wants do these products meet? And then what's driving this person to pick these products out from any other? You know, when you're going down the Trader Joe's frozen food aisle and you're looking at all those fun packaged foods, why are you going to pick one thing over another? Well, you have to stop and ask yourself these questions. A lot of times we're not even thinking about it, but this is what food manufacturers are trying to understand before you even sort of develop this need or want. They want to get ahead of you so that they can meet your need when you have it. So when we think about what are these consumer needs and wants, they really drive behavior. So you might be hungry. That's the really most basic one when it comes to food. Or you might be interested in improving your wellness. Here it is January. How many of you are doing a dry January or a Whole 30 or some other reset for the year? There's also global exploration, which is happening and very much fueled by social media, but also travel and a diverse population. Comfort, always a big driver of behavior, but we also have multiple generations now that are really driven by sensory elevation. And then we can't forget the cool factor of like, what's the cool thing to try? And I want to be part of the crowd, that's chasing after Dubai chocolate, for example. So, at the root of these needs and wants, underneath this behavior, there are basic human values. And I think this is the most important to think about is what are those values that are connecting to things in the marketplace that make you, that connect to you, that kind of connect to who you are and what you care about. So, for example, let's think of the behavior driver of comfort. Now, here, these are examples from Korean cuisine, and you have a picture of a Korean person next to a rice pot. So, part of comfort, the value behind comfort is belonging. Think about that comfort food from your youth. That's something that perhaps was part of your family makeup or something you had at a certain holiday time. It makes you feel like you belong and you're part of a group or that have a similar experience or tradition. And it also is a way for you to reinforce that identity and it makes you feel good, especially during tough times. Another behavior driver, exploration, trying something new. The value underneath that is perspective. You want to expand your perspective, your understanding of what's out in the world. I want to go and explore and I want to expand my understanding of what's out there. Another behavior driver is wellness. And so, what's underneath that? Very often it's achievement. It's this value of I want to achieve something. I want to create and make set a goal for myself, and I want to make that goal. And so, this is underneath, and this is a picture of kimchi, which is a fermented food that a lot of people eat to improve their microbiome. So let's just take a look at this is a food cart, the Co-Sisters Soul Food from Portland, Oregon, where there's lots of food carts. So what are the needs and values at play here? If you're going to this food hall or this parking lot where there's a lot of food trucks, what's happening when you go through that? Well, some of the things may be really obvious. I'm hungry and I need food. Or if you're Korean American, maybe this is your family's comfort food and you've had a bad day. And so you really want to go to the shop because it actually gives you comfort. It reminds you of your family time. You might need to wake up with some hot and spicy food. You're having a dull day and you need to, create some sensory elevation there. Or maybe you're just curious about Korean food and you haven't tried it before. And you might even talk to the people at this food truck and ask them about the different foods and what role they play. Or you want to try something new. What about, I think I'm coming down with a cold, so I want a warming bowl of tofu soup, or I want to have that kimchi to help boost my microbiome. Or it could be that you're on a budget and they have a very affordable snack sandwich that you can just buy right there. And I'm thinking, Monty, you must go through this too. Every time that we're out and trying to make a decision about what we're going to eat, these different things are at play, and we don't really think about them very consciously. But if we were pressed, we could probably answer those questions.
Well, I think I was picking up that a batch of pho because I was coming down with something.
See, so I think this is really, these are the drivers that influence your behavior, but they're rooted in something a little bit deeper.
Yeah.
So here's an example, and this is where we get a little academic. This is from Shalom Schwartz. This is a well-known diagram of human values that was created in the 1960s. These are not American, or these are human values globally.
Interesting.
And these are the values that are both kind of the things that inform us for our own interior life, but also sort of inward facing as well as outward facing. So if you think of the value of universalism, this is kind of embracing the world and humanity, the earth and the environment, caring about equality, thinking about social justice. This is where we're sort of looking outward and thinking about all people and hoping for kind of a positive side of that. On the other side, in the lower left corner, you have power. This is another very big human value of I want to have power over something, whether it's wealth or social recognition or authority of some kind. I also think power is also very much tied to health, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. I want to have control over my health, and so I want to exert some power. Conformity, it may seem a little negative, but actually it's about perhaps being part of a tradition, conforming to a family or a societal norm, being polite. Some days we wish people were a little more conforming. So it can really have different nuances, but these core values really can connect to the different behaviors around food, which I'll show right here. So this is a model that I developed at the Center for Culinary Development, and yet it's a little bit universal, and I think it's a good way of helping people understand kind of what are those values underneath our food behaviors. So if we think about, I've created these four categories: nutrition, identity and self, culinary culture, and the source. And they represent some of those values on the chart we just saw. So, under nutrition, for example, we think about health, wellness, food as medicine. This is a big trend driving new product development in the food space. Identity and self is more about who we are as an individual and who we are as part of a group. And that connects to the food we consider our comfort, but also my personal indulgence, how I personalize my food or make it, build a hamburger just the way I like it. But it can also be about getting prestige and status. Culinary culture is the area around sensory adventure, maybe celebrating global food, anything to do with new culinary techniques. And think about the air fryer. That was a new appliance that really changed the way a lot of people ate, in part because it connected to their values around having less fat in their diet. And eating a wider variety of foods that are crunchy, very sensory, lots about crunch and crispness. The source is the driver around perhaps where does food come from? If you really care about its source, is it sustainable? Is there an element of eco consciousness? But also, where does it come from? I recently had a lobster roll thanks to someone bringing some lobster back here to the Bay Area from Maine. And so that really connected us to New England cuisine and felt very authentic and true. So these different things play out across different menus and, of course, in the grocery store. So, to dive deep and illustrate how these values and trends can align for innovation, I very often work with clients and companies that are trying to figure out how can we make a new X box of cereal, snack bar. We'll use coffee in this example. So, if you're somebody who's producing new coffee, to be able to figure out what that new product should be, you need to think about, well, what are the needs and wants we want to meet? What are those values? How can we connect to people? So, for example, a company could tap into the values around identity and self and make kind of a hipster coffee or a very authentic coffee or coffee that is done with a new kind of technique. And that the values behind that coffee are the values around identity and self. But perhaps you want to use nutrition as a driver and you want to have a coffee that has extra energy or a prepared product. This little no-brainer is a coffee. It was a coconut milk-based creamer that you would add to your coffee that would give you these healthy fats that would give you more focus. Or maybe this turmeric latte is more up your alley, and it's putting that turmeric in for anti-inflammatory benefits. Another way of a whole other set of culinary culture values would be coffee from a certain place, like this Blue Bottle New Orleans coffee, which is made with a chicory blend and has milk in it. Or here's a Vietnamese coffee in the center with a traditional Vietnamese coffee filter called a fin dripping into the base of condensed milk. And I'll have to stop here and ask you, Monty, did you get a Vietnamese coffee with your pho?
I did not, but I will say Vietnamese coffee is having a moment.
Oh, and I like to say I predicted this many years ago, but I I
Before,
digress.
only you would put Blue Bottle Coffee and Coffee Mate together in the same
That's
slide.
right.
But I get it.
Well, what we're looking at here is culinary culture is like I want to tap into a new culture, or I want, this kind of flavor adventure, this butter toffee, coffee mate,
Mhm.
kind of comes from like a culinary space. So yeah, definitely. We've got all kinds of things can fit under those same drivers. And then the source, let's say you really want to connect to people who want to buy fair trade certified coffee or organic coffee or coffee that comes from a certain place. So you can see these are all coffees, but they connect to different values. And this is how companies and how entrepreneurs can think about how to come up with a new product is what is that product? What need or want is that product going to meet? And what is underneath that? What value am I trying to trade on? So I like to say that innovation descends from a trends hierarchy. And here we're going to step back a little bit and think about like, well, where do these things come from? The overarching level here are macro societal trends, things that happen in the world that are beyond our control, but that impact us. When things changed and shift, think about COVID, for example, and the COVID pandemic, there's something that happened to society. And when it did, it changed our consumer values, it changed our needs and wants. So, as, for example, COVID started rolling out, the things that our values started changing of what we were looking for from food. And so, as consumers, what we wanted from the marketplace changed. And that then influenced certain products to become more popular or less popular. And a great example is orange juice. Orange juice sales skyrocketed during the pandemic because of the vitamin C and the notion that it was going to boost your immunity.
Huh.
Prior to that, it was considered a sugar bomb. And now we're kind of back to orange juice as a sugar bomb. But you can see it's the same product, but our evolving values and needs shifted and propelled orange juice to greater sales and popularity.
Yeah.
One of the tools also that I use is something borrowed from the business administration world, which are you can map societal trends according to these categories called the STEEP factors: social, technological, economic, environmental, and political. And this is how trend forecasters get in front of things that are happening by studying what's going on in society in these different categories and how might that have an impact down the road. And then when it does have an impact, how can we be prepared to be ready in that evolving marketplace? I won't go into this too far, but this just sort of shows you like all how complex it is to try to get ahead of the curve. But these are different places where you can look for clues. So I'll just pick a couple, going back to Korean food. When you look on the social side and, dial this back, 10, 15 years, what we started seeing was a rise of the Asian population. This can in part be traced to changes in immigration laws in the late 60s that allowed more Koreans to immigrate into the United States. Consequently, after that influx, we started having Korean families grow, and that eventually nudged up the census so that the Asian population was growing faster than any other race between the year of 2000 and 2010. We also saw that the millennial population, in part because millennials came from more of a multicultural background and they started becoming more interested in these different types of food. And so with the rise of that population and their smartphones and their interest in adventure, it started really propelling a lot of different food trends, Korean being one of them. On the economic side, if any of you were around in the recession that hit between about 2007 and 2010, what we started to see were the rise of food trucks. Food trucks were enabled in part because now a lot of people had cell phones and iPhones, which came about a few years earlier. And there was social media like Facebook that allowed small businesses to market themselves in a new way. Twitter was also part of that. So all of a sudden, Roy Choi, who was a classically trained chef, working in continental dining, who decided to embrace his own background as a Korean American who grew up eating Mexican food in LA to create the Kogi taco truck, which is probably one of the most, famous food trucks and companies that got started. But now you can find Korean tacos, all across the board. But it really, we can trace this back to, his parents immigrating into the United States in a certain point in time. And this is the part where I kind of geek out on. And you don't have to go that far back, but it really helps place these trends in a bigger context. We also saw the growth of fast casual restaurants in the last 10, 15, 20 years, like the Chipotle Mexican Grill, which got people used to buying kind of hybrid food and being able to put their own food together. And then the growth of convenience, packaged foods, and global flavors. Believe me, I did not get a chance to eat these foods from a package growing up, but now we're just spoiled for choice. And there's so many outlets, including Trader Joe's, but Whole Foods, you name it. There's a lot of choices out there. The next part of understanding how trends work is we've got these consumer needs and wants represented by our trend drivers, and these trends can appear whether they're cooking trends, restaurant trends, grocery trends, you name it. This is the culinary landscape. But to make sense of them, and Monty, thank you for starting off this conversation by talking about trends, how trends started. Back in the early 2000s, a lot of new trends were coming from a chef space. This is a tool, the trend map, of monitoring the trend sort of adoption rate, like where are new trends coming from? And they enabled me as a forecaster to study those spaces to get a sense of what I should be looking for, but then also how mature a trend would be. So, for example, I would use a five-stage trend map. A lot of companies just use four. It really depends on how you're going to divide it. And you would look across food service, new packaged foods that were appearing in grocery stores or specialty food stores. What were the trends that the media was talking about and that society was talking about? What were the health and wellness trends? There's a lot of places to look. And then to map them across their maturity level, you would use these stages, which our company had defined, to understand, like, well, how popular has it been? If it's already to mainstream, is it a trend worth imitating, or is it too late? Are there already enough foods out there? So these are the
Never.
types of things that we would pay attention to. Now, here's one
Never
example.
enough foods out there, Kara.
There's
There's
what
always room for more foods out there.
There's always room, exactly. So here's an example of looking at plant-based foods. What's going on with plant-based foods lately? Is there anything new coming up? Well, there's always something new. So, for example, last year at the at Natural Products Expo West, which is a natural foods trade show that's in Anaheim, California, every March, I saw My Forest Foods making and serving mycelium bacon. And this is made from the root structure of oyster mushrooms that gets compressed and turned into a meat-like product. This product was not packaged and available for sale, but I bet this year at Expo it may be. And these are the kinds of things you watch from one show to the next is, did they get this in a package? Another new product, sort of in a stage two space, is Prime Roots, which is a Berkeley-based company that's using koji, which is a fungus, to create lunch meat alternatives that are very high in umami. And they're selling them at a grocery store that Monty and I shop in every week, the Berkeley Bowl. We'll also see Goodle's Vegan is Believin'. This is a cashew milk-based vegan mac and cheese box from a popular kind of alternative mac and cheese brand that's popular in Whole Foods and with other natural consumers. In the stage four last year, Impossible Foods put out a new product, their new steak bites made from soy protein and starches. That was a big deal last year. So every year, kind of looking at what's the new product. And then on the mainstream side, we saw mainstream Jello come out with an oat milk pudding. So here you can see there's still news in every sort of quadrant of the trend map. The goal is like, in 4 years' time, will Oscar Mayer have a mycelium bacon? That's the question. What do you think? Would you want to put money on that?
Well, it just reminds me, you go to these trade shows, and one year I heard somebody scream out, "Give me a carb," during the low carb era. So, but it's interesting. Yeah, obviously, if Jello's latching onto oat milk, clearly the alt milks and the oat milk, they're here to stay. They've determined that they're here to stay. But some of these other things, yeah, who knows over time, Vegetarianism and veganism aren't going to go away, but will there be the return of the tofu burger, or will there continue to be innovation in all these categories you just mapped out?
Right. And this is kind of, the work that I do, helping brands kind of understand where things are going. But on the other side of it, for smaller brands and entrepreneurs, like the entrepreneurs you work with, Mani, for them, they may start off with one single idea, and then the big thing is, how do I grow? Or what's the next big idea? How do I expand my reach? And what trends should I be tapping into for new flavor exploration, new formats? Or should I even be in this space? Is there enough interest? So these are the questions that big companies and little companies ask themselves.
Yeah.
So we're going to move into this notion of trend adoption, of when and why do people adopt trends? And we've kind of set it up. We know that, trends will grow if there's enough people for whom these trends meet their needs and wants. So looking again at Korean food started, and again, this is back in the early 2000s with chefs. As we talked about, here we have David Chang and Roy Choi, two Korean Americans, are both very instrumental in pushing Korean food and Asian food in general. So David Chang here, it's opened up Momofuku and Momofuku Sambar in New York City. And of course, now the Momofuku brand is selling packaged food and it's all around the world. So that is a big success story. But we also saw the Korean government in around, 10, 15 years ago, sent out, had a sort of a publicity campaign about Korean food and sent emissaries to different cities, and they would invite tastemakers and chefs to come to these presentations to learn about Korean food, and they'd encourage them by connecting them with ingredient suppliers or giving them recipes or training them so that they would start spreading the love. Japanese government does this as well. And this is sort of the role of policy in all of a sudden, why am I talking about this? Well, maybe there was a campaign and then the media picked it up and you read about it and on it goes. But we also saw cooking magazines like Bon Appetit started talking about bibimbap. We started seeing more specialty foods coming out, more food trucks. So all of this really started. And honestly, it still takes a trend a good 10 years or more to really take hold. And then it also depends, like, when do you start counting? These are all sort of parts of the equation. So as trends get more popular, you start seeing them in the specialty food retail. This is a place where you have artisans and entrepreneurs presenting food very often of their own ancestry. And then if the food gets popular, very often a larger company will buy that brand and then expand it. And you'll go to the food show the next year, and all of a sudden those entrepreneurs aren't there anymore, but now you have a bunch of guys in suits, and you know that that company got sold, which is the goal of many entrepreneurs. His
And
goal,
gals in suits.
yeah,
Guys
uh,
and gals in suits.
and gals and suits for sure. Um, but here you can see a variety of Korean foods, including snacks, more traditional foods like sauces, and then things that you start seeing how Korean food moves into the snack space. And then Korean products have definitely gone mainstream by now. We have, kimchi salsa, we have different kinds of prepared foods and snacks. Spam has a Korean barbecue flavor. Lay's has a Korean style fried chicken. I tried these chips and I do not advise you to try them, and you may not even be able to get them, but sometimes it can go a little too far.
Is moku? Oh, moku's plant-based.
They're made with mushrooms. It's actually very nice, chewy. It's like an oyster mushroom jerky.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's plant-based, really nice. So you can see here, the good news is once a trend becomes mainstream, different consumers at different places can have their pick. You can be a little more traditional at Trader Joe's, or you can be a little less traditional. And that's often what happens to a cuisine trend is it becomes a flavor profile that can be used by in a lot of different ways, whether you like it or not. And that gets to this question of what's authentic or what's inspired, and does that matter? And there's been a lot of talk in the food community about authenticity, about ownership, who has the right to represent a cuisine or to make money off of it. And these are, thorny questions. There was some backlash a number of years ago to two American Caucasian women who went to Mexico, fell in love with some kind of taco format and brought it to and created a little business in a city and borrowed liberally from that taco, but gave no credit whatsoever.
Mm.
So now we're in a period of time where that doesn't fly very well. Um, we're very much more as a culture and society interested in more roots, more tradition. But at the same time, if you ask what is the traditional kimchi of Koreans, everyone's got their different recipe. So these also become, well, what is authentic? And so these are questions you have to ask yourself, especially if you're an entrepreneur starting out and presenting something that maybe isn't part of your own heritage or that you don't have firsthand knowledge about. The most important thing is acknowledging where you're getting some of these things. But in the marketplace, and for bigger companies who are trying to take advantage of trends, there's a lot of very inspired food out there, along with some more authentic. And so here you have a stir-fry Korean spicy beef in a cup noodles. That's relatively authentic, especially because cup noodles are something that people in Asian cultures eat all the time. The Korean barbecue char burger at The Habit, a little more inspired. Same with the Korean barbecue steak pizza from California Pizza Kitchen. Now, this is a place that is, went got its name by making a Thai pizza. So we expect California Pizza Kitchen to borrow from current trends. But this kimbap Korean rice roll in Trader Joe's that came out in 2023 is a pretty traditional item. And we're lucky now that if you go to H Mart, for example, you can get food that's imported from Korea that's totally Korean and try it yourself. Another big question, this is always a good one, is what's the difference between a trend and a fad? And I think this is very important to understand. Here I have example of some recent kind of faddish things that have been making their way around TikTok or in food media, including the princess cake. Can you believe that, Monty, that the princess cake somehow came back in style? Crazy. I learned how to make that in culinary school in the early 90s. This is a classic cake. And it just shows you never know what's going to come back again. We have the girl dinner here in the middle. Dubai chocolate, of course, filled with the pistachio cream and shredded phyllo dough. Dirty sodas, seed oil free, or that TikTok guy who makes cucumbers in a jar, which I actually think that he's got some great ideas. So one of the things about a fad, they tend to burn high and bright. They kind of come from nowhere. Well, now they come from TikTok, and then all of a sudden they go viral and everyone's talking about them. But they don't necessarily have the roots that a trend does. A trend is something that really connects to your values and that can be meaningful to you. And trends also usually take a longer time to mature. Um, so there's definitely a space for fad or the latest baked good or the latest flavor of whatever. And that definitely fuels a lot of business. But longer term trends are typically also where might be a more sustainable business model, for example, unless you're really good at being able to capture a fad. So here's a few fads from the past, 10 years or so. Speaking of carbs, here we have low carb ice cream. A man developed Halo Top that did not come from a company or an ice cream maker, but a man who decided he wanted a low carb, kind of high protein ice cream. And it exploded in popularity to the point that every ice cream maker had to suddenly have a low carb version. And this created a lot of business. Eventually, the Halo Top got sold, but not before it influenced a ton of imitators and kind of created a need in the marketplace. Now, for me, as like traditionalist, I'm like, do I really want to have my ice cream experience be low carb? No, not for me, but plenty of people did. CBD enhanced was another very big trend that a lot of people thought was going to make them a lot of business. And here were some brands that kind of popped up, in the last, 10 years or so, maybe a little less, when the CBD started becoming legalized along with legalized marijuana. And you started seeing it in snack bars, all kinds of drinks, different sorts of little bites and whatnot. Lots of problems with CBD. The FDA has never ruled on it. Where is the source coming from? Do consumers even understand the dose? All kinds of issues there. Companies that are manufacturing some of these drinks wouldn't even touch it. So if you created a CBD drink, you might not be able to find a manufacturer to make it. Very difficult. And so what happened? They lasted for a while, but they definitely decreased. So Halo Top sales have been declining since 2017, although it certainly made a lot of business while it had its run. It was sold to a big ice cream maker in Iowa, and it was reformulated with ultra filtered milk and concentrated protein. So they kind of tweaked it and changed it a little bit. CBD enhanced, a lot of those foods went away, the brands disappeared, or they, took out the CBD and just really limited their choices.
Kara, I want to ask you, it's so interesting. Perhaps if all those other companies hadn't latched onto the low carb ice cream thing, Halo Top would have continued to hold market share. Instead, it probably got diluted. But then, as
Sure.
you're saying, the interest in it just ultimately, like, you're still eating ice cream. Why not just eat the one you like? I mean, what do you think that drove people to stop purchasing it? Too much market permeation from other brands, or?
Well, I really think these things evolve. First of all, there's a novelty factor, and after a while, maybe, it just runs its course. I mean, there's always sort of a section of most categories where there's like kind of the extreme health, let me call it, or it's slightly on the extreme side. And you can look in that extreme side of the frozen treats aisle. There were Weight Watcher fudgsicles, there's sugar-free things. So there's always something going on there.
Yeah.
And the low carb came out at the time where there were paleo diets, lots of paleo diets were big. People started thinking differently about their carbs, looking for protein. Um, Brides were eating it like, well, I'm going to do this so I can still fit into my wedding dress. I mean, there are all kinds of situations, but also these fads evolve and they just get sort of replaced by something else. So now, in that kind of extreme health section of the ice cream category, you have GLP-1 friendly ice creams that are high protein, so that's similar, but they also have more fiber, typically from a food ingredient like inulin. So these are made from plants and they stick them in your food so that they can increase the fiber count. Tapioca starch is another one. And then there's new sweeteners. Allulose is a new kind of sugar-free sweetener that's been used in baked goods and is a lot nicer tasting than some of the others. So this is another thing that spurs innovation is new ingredients, new technology. Um, and so now this is what people are talking about. It's less about that low carb and more about more fiber, more protein to fit in my GLP-1 diet. The CBD drinks, which were promising a mood enhancement, the idea behind CBD was to offer you relaxation. A lot of people that don't drink alcohol were interested in CBD because they didn't want the alcohol, they still wanted to relax. In its place, we have ingredients that aren't as controversial, different functional ingredients, different adaptogenic ingredients. These adaptogens are plants that have an element in them that help adapt to the stress that you're under to help support that stress. And a lot of the adaptogenic ingredients have been around for a very long time and are part of traditional medicine traditions, like in Chinese medicine or Ayurvedic medicine in India. But now we're seeing them like all those medicinal mushrooms, different kinds of teas and plants, and they're offering like mood and craft functional sodas have yerba mate for energy along with black tea, inulin, that's that fiber ingredient, and then different kinds of medicinal mushrooms. Mind Garden is using GABA, which is a nutrient that supposedly helps with our brain health, along with L-theanine, which is a stimulant found in green tea, ginseng, which is an adaptogen that also gives you energy, along with ashwagandha that helps you deal with stress, and same with rhodiola rosea. But it's packaged in a really cool format, cool graphics, fun flavors.
This is fascinating, I got to say, because if I just look at a product that peaked, like the Halo Top or some of the like hard kombucha has sort of morphed into what Boochcraft is doing. It's fascinating to see how the next wave is maybe a different company, but they're building on what they learned from this other company in the past, and they're meeting the needs of that continue to evolve consumer and their
Right.
focus and their interests.
So the need is still there. I want a drink to relax me, so that's the need. And so but what else is informing that relaxation? I want it clean label. I don't want sugar, fill in the blank. Is it available? So these are all the things that companies think about when they're trying to go after another consumer share. Or if you're a small entrepreneur and let's say you've been making your own little teas at home and you think you should bottle them, well, you have to think are enough people out there that want the same benefit and have the same values I have, values around sugar, packaging, flavoring. And that's you're trying to find that alignment.
Yeah, thank you.
So my message is to look for the underlying trends in fads and try to understand them, especially if you want to like hop on a fad bus, go ahead, but just make sure you know what you're getting into. So if we look at the GLP-1 foods, which are going to be a big topic this year, what we're really looking at is weight management, which has been around forever, improved health and digestion, another kind of evergreen story that has informed food cultures globally forever, mindful indulgence, and then longer term benefits from a whole food diet high in natural fiber. And you'll still hear nutritionists say, just eat real food. So, these messages, um, it's just so fascinating. They're out there,
Yeah,
but, it's more fun to buy a GLP bar that's, just for you and
yeah,
costs $5. So.
yeah.
So let's dive into trend forecasts. We've teased this a little bit, and this is just a short section because it's just the perfect time to talk about trend forecasts. And I invite anyone who's looking for information from trend forecasts to consider the the point of view of the person or entity sharing the trend. What are they really trying to tell you? And Monty and I were talking about this earlier. Is it just PR buzz? But usually there needs to be a little bit of substance, to take hold. So you'll find at this time of year that professional associations will put out trends, typically trends that benefit their members. If their members are restaurants, they're going to tell you about trends in restaurants to get you excited about going to restaurants. If they're trends in specialty to food, same thing. They want you to go buy some more specialty food, whether it's cheese or charcuterie or jam or a new coffee. So they're amplifying kind of the point of view of their members in the associations. Market research companies are also trying to show off how smart they are, and they are smart. They've done a lot of work, they've invested in consumer research, but they're also trying to show off, whatever they do best. They may not be as comprehensive. You really have to look at a lot of different trend forecasts to sort of get a full picture because each one is kind of a slice of the marketplace. Food manufacturers like Campbell's or McCormick is very famous for putting out a flavor cast every year. Gee, I wonder if it has anything to do with the spices that they want to sell.
You think?
Uh, but they've invested a lot of money in developing perhaps a new line of spices, whether they're sugar-free or they're about Korean food, and they want you to know about it. And so they may be predicting that that's going to come out to play. Same thing with restaurant PR consulting company. They're representing their clients who are hospitality professionals or restaurant professionals. And I'm not saying they're not true. But you just have to consider where they're coming from and be sure you look for a well-rounded group of trends to really kind of make sense of things. But we're also seeing media, National Geographic puts out trends. The flavor houses are actually some of my favorite trends. These are the companies that create the actual flavorings that are in your candy, cereal, snack bar. And they're interesting because they are using data to inform these trends. Uh, and it just, again, is just part of a story. Somebody sent me a Flavor House trend report and said, "What do you think?" And I read it. I was like, "Wow, was this report written 5 or 6 years ago?" So you just really have to have a sense and compare it to a few others.
Well, I get a lot of these blasts, as it appears you do. Do you have to read all of them? Do you have to wade through the fluff to see what's legit? I mean, is that
I mean,
part of
it
the work?
depends. If you have a business reason, if you are interested in understanding what's coming, let's say you're going to be thinking about innovation in the year to come, yes, you might want to look at those. Pick the ones that relate to your business. One of the challenges for a trend forecaster is you have to read all of them, but other people don't. And so, try to find the ones that align most to perhaps, your business or where you think you might be going. So, Monty, you owned a bakery for many years. I was a regular customer. I love looking at the baked good trends. But baked good trends and trends in bakeries might be very informative to larger food companies who want to tap into that. The other thing is there's a lot of cross-category innovation. So you can be inspired from what's going on in ice cream over in your baked goods aisle and vice versa. So there is some cross-pollination. It is kind of smart to have a view of what's going on.
Yeah.
Here's the big caveat. Look for expertise and data, but beware of the echo chamber. And this just sort of shows you um, some of the trends that started getting published. So last fall, trends start coming out in the fall, and there's always a race of like who can get their trends out first. There's a lot of pressure when you're a trend person. Oh, and this Whole Food Trends, I say I have a typo there. It really was 1025. But Whole Foods came out with their trend, and then Food and Wines talked about their trends, and then these trends also get picked up in Instagram. So my other caveat is if you are doing research, watch out that it's not the same trend press release that has been being repeated again and again and again to make you think that beef tallow is really going to be in this year.
Yeah.
which is one of the Whole Foods trends they called out, along with fiber, which makes a lot of sense, and vinegar, which I'm still not sure where the vinegar came from, but
That's so amusing because I was recently in Ireland and I heard that the best fish and chips are when the chips are cooked in beef tallow. Trying to find a fish and chip shop that uses beef tallow turned out to be a challenge.
well, those of us who are old enough remember when McDonald's very famously fried their fries in beef tallow, and there's a number of restaurants today that are frying their French fries in beef tallow. And I will say, if you are a beef lover, they are delicious. If you are not a beef lover, it might be a turnoff.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's why McDonald's got away from it.
Yeah.
But it sounds like it's a head to tail, use of, if you're going to be eating beef, it's a head to tail method, correct?
Oh, yes, it's very traditional, and it's part of a very traditional way of eating, you know, saturated fats that come from a real source, instead of being manufactured, and very extractive, the way that we're using. This kind of gets into the whole seed oil conversation, but this is a conversation that's been going on for nearly 100 years, ever since we started processing all our food instead of using food from our farm. Uh, there have been questions about this, so we could do a whole nother presentation just on fats.
Yeah, that's a big topic. Thank you.
So why do food trends matter? So hopefully by now I've convinced you that food trends can really drive business growth. If you're in the sriracha business, or if you jumped on the sriracha bandwagon, maybe a little late now, but it definitely exploded and has it's not just about sriracha anymore. It's about all the hot sauces, all the hot and spicy ingredients, all the hot and spicy flavorings that you see on wings and all kinds of places. So, kind of have sriracha to thank for this, in part, expanded interest in everything hot and spicy. They also inspire lots of product and menu development. So if you think of that rise in Korean food ended up on a lot of restaurants and restaurant chains like Bonchon, which is a Korean fried chicken fast food restaurant that we saw in New York and a few other places. But we also saw it across the board of you might see like a Korean fried chicken or a Korean barbecue chicken on all kinds of menus now. So they really do drive expansion and menu development. And then trends also really expand industries and spur innovation. There are many entrepreneurs that are looking to create more interesting plant-based meat alternatives. Meaty is one of them that used mushrooms to create meat alternatives. Sadly, Meaty is no more. So sometimes it just doesn't hold, doesn't take.
Yeah.
So since I put this together, Meaty has closed. Nature's Find is still happening. Um, this is really cool. They're using an ingredient found in a geyser at Yellowstone. Some kind of something they found in the water that they're now using to create this meat alternative. And
Okay, to me that just sounds wrong.
it's pretty cool. They actually taste really quite good.
Okay, all right. Well, can I ask you before we move on, aren't chili crisp, probably chili crisp more than salsa matcha, although they're two sort of different cultural approaches to a very similar, are they sort of honing in on sriracha's, you know,
I think they're part of a sriracha wave. I mean, they're definitely in that, when something grows big enough, it becomes its own category. And I remember giving traditional Chinese chili crisp as a Christmas gift many years ago, to people as like, hey, check out this new thing. And chili crisp has then begot salsa matcha and a number of other things. But that's also part of the current generation's interest in food textures and wanting not just hot sauce, but hot sauce with a crunch, which has
Yeah,
been really interesting to see how it grows.
nice.
So when you think about how to tap a trend for innovation, you don't necessarily just have to replicate the bottle of sriracha and make your own hot sauce. You can see that it can be applied in a lot of different ways. And so the bubble tea or boba trend is another one that has really inspired a lot of growth and popularity. We've been able to get bubble tea drinks in the San Francisco Bay Area for decades, because we have a high population of Chinese and Taiwanese Americans who originated these drinks, originally came from Taiwan. And so you still have the original, which is fueling the opening of all kinds of different tea shops, specialty shops. But now we also can get our
Huh.
packaged bubble tea that even has the boba or the tapioca pearls in the can. You can get a drink kit that helps you make boba tea. You can get boba tea in your frozen ice cream mochi. Or this is my favorite, an Asian trend leveraged by a Mexican brand. So Jarritos is that Mexican soda that you typically see in a glass bottle. And here they came out with their Hari Boba drink where they have popping boba in their Mexican kind of agua fresca. I love that.
That is very cool. I love Jarritos Tamarindo, but I would not have put this together that this is their brand. Good move on their part.
Yeah, so it is really interesting, and these are the kinds of projects that Monty and I would work on and come up with these goofy things that now there's a population of people looking to engage with their drinks and have a chewy factor. Why not stick it in a different drink? And this is what's so fun about innovation. The last thing to really talk about here is how multiple trends can drive success. When we look at like what is going to push something to mainstream, it's because it's appealing to a bigger and bigger audience. It's not just a niche audience looking for Halo Top ice cream. It has to be a big audience with multiple drivers. So every year, Circana, which is a big market research company, puts out its new product pace setters. And these are products that have made over 100 million in like their first year. And it's really hard to do that. And typically it's like an energy drink and like diapers. But that's because they do both food and non-food. But here, for example, this Ghost soda, there's multiple trends that are driving its popularity, including its clean energy label. It has some nostalgia because you can see very small, there's a Warhead sour watermelon. So it's a co-brand with the candy Warhead. So you've also got this like hot and spicy thing. And then you've got flavor adventure because it's sour watermelon and sensory elevation, not only from the drink itself, but the can.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on there. Very popular. Kevin's is a started off as a brand selling fresh prepared food, like in the deli section, and they're paleo. They're paleo meals. They've now gone frozen as well. But here you have paleo orange chicken. Well, we've got this high protein paleo trend going. It's also gluten-free, soy-free, so it appeals to a lot of people on specialty diets. Plus, you've got this global flavor adventure with kind of a General Tso's chicken-esque Chinese meal. Notice there's no rice in that dish. But now you're bringing in not just the paleo people, but a lot of different people who have different needs, especially these dietary needs. And what do you think the biggest driver of the Oreo mint sandwiches is, Monty?
My favorite ice cream sandwich is a chocolate mint ice cream sandwich.
So
Yeah.
we've got flavor, lots of
That's
nostalgia.
not frozen, right? That's the cookie.
No, it's a frozen ice cream sandwich.
Oh, it is okay. Got
Yeah.
it. Makes sense.
So big ice cream sandwich was very popular when it came out. And it's both tapping nostalgia, familiarity, but also that novelty is here I can have my Oreo in a new place.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So I'll close today with my message to entrepreneurs, which is, define your reason for being. What really is your reason? What are you about? What benefits does your product offer? What's its highest order benefit? Is it an energy drink or is it a flavor adventure? You really have to think of what's the biggest core benefit and then what are the secondary benefits. Um, and this is also informs your marketing plan of how can you communicate what you're giving to that consumer as they're trying to, meet their needs and wants. You really have to think about how can you communicate it? Is it with marketing messages, on-packed information? I've seen little entrepreneurial packages that have too many marketing messages, and I can't even figure out like what is this about? Is it about energy? Is it about boba tea? Is it a protein powder? I'm not even sure. And then when tapping into current trends, be sure that the trend is mature enough to connect with your target consumer. Now, that could be a little more niche focused if you have more of a niche product, or if you're really trying to get mass acceptance, you need to be tapping a trend that community or your target consumer cares about. that they have a value that connects with it or some kind of driver. So again, think about these different drivers. Is it a nutrition driver? Is it about comfort? Is it culinary? Is it about where it's from? And then where on this trend map, how popular are you going? And that will help make some decisions and sort of help you communicate and also help you grow your brand. So any other questions? Bonnie.
Yeah. Hi. Those four categories, excuse me, those are really the core areas that all entrepreneurs draw from, right?
Yeah,
Cultural identity, health and wellness, my story, my comfort, my sustainability. But you've encapsulated it in a different way, and I think it's so pertinent.
well, thank you. I'm going to stop sharing now so we can just
Oh, sure.
wrap this up. But in my experience, tracking and looking at trends, I've sort of simplified it into those four buckets that a lot of trends and trend drivers can really, be defined that way. And there's a lot more territory inside that. But it's a good, easy way to, especially for new entrepreneurs, to think about where do I fit? What benefits, what values does my food item um, correspond to? And what value am I trying to communicate? Because if you can connect to consumers with your shared values, you start building a loyal audience. You get people on your side. They like your brand. They promote your brand, and that helps you grow and keep your business.
And another thing that the wording that you used is what benefit does my product? It's so interesting that modern business philosophy, the lean canvas, a pitch deck, what problem does your business solve, right? That's every business. And in the food business, that's weird. I'm solving a problem. I'm giving you a cookie. I'm making you a drink. But I think maybe a more focused question is what benefit does your
Right.
food restaurant, food truck, packaged product, food truck, well, whatever it is, what benefit does it bring the
Well,
consumer?
or what need is it trying to meet? That's the problem.
Yeah,
Consumers have a need,
yeah,
and you
yeah,
want to meet that need and get their business. You want to get that um, share of market. The market
yeah.
share is like, how can I get mine? But especially if you really have something that's personal or that you really believe in or that you're really good at it, whatever it might be, you have to then think about like, well, what need is this meeting? Or is there a need for this? I mean, that's another question, especially for people just thinking about getting into the businesses. Is there a need for this? Is there a space in the marketplace? Big companies also have these same questions. They're always like, where's the white space? Where can I find, new space to cram in yet another product? And so you have to kind of identify an
Yeah.
emerging need. I think the GLP-1s, and those are the Ozempics, Wegovy's, all of the weight management drugs, as soon as I started hearing about this, I'm like, this is a total game changer, and it's going to take years. But even the news today is Walgreens is selling a pill form of Wegovy. Uh, so people don't have to use a needle and inject themselves. They can actually get a pill. It still costs a lot of money. Your insurance is probably not covering it. So we have a ways to go. But as more and more people get on these medications, their needs have already impacted businesses. They're eating less snacks, less desserts, more protein, more fiber. They're buying less groceries overall. That's really a threat to the marketplace.
Wow, I hadn't even thought of that. Well, maybe we were buying too much food before. Maybe we'll buy the food that matters now.
There's definitely other cultures and places where people eat a lot less to start off with. So it's a
Um,
good
be-
January message.
yes, it is. Before we wrap up, I just want to reference one of our episodes was with Reem Hassani. She's the co-founder of Numi Tea. And one of she brought us through the history of the aesthetic changes and the packaging, and they've done three brand refreshes. Well, they had their launching image,
Mhm.
packaging sort of message, and then 7 years later, and then 7 years later. That's real interesting because not only did the look and feel, but the research into their consumer and what they're looking for, what they're responding to in the packaging, and then even I hate to say tagline because I know there's more to it than that, but I forget what the phrase they use is. How does that vibe and intersect with your world when you see brands that are established, but they sort of do that refresh every few years?
Well, they're responding to the evolving marketplace, to the evolving consumer. I mean, over, a number of years, you now are either attracting a new consumer. Gen Z now is in the marketplace with their own dollars. So, how are you going to attract a Generation Z consumer while not alienating your boomer consumer? Um, these are big questions, but also people like a refresh, not all the time. It's expensive, but it also shows that the brand is staying current with the times or that the company is responding to shifts and changes in the marketplace as well as new design trends. I mean, just look at the Pantone color of the year every year. Don't
Right.
look at it for this year, but it's white. But
Okay.
these are their design trends change as well, and especially when it comes to packaging, the graphic style. I can spot a millennial oriented package with those puffy 70s letters from a mile away. And if it's targeted to a millennial woman, you can just see that packaging. To me, that's a little problematic, is it feels too narrow unless millennial women can buy enough of your adaptogenic soda for you to make business. But that's part of it too, is who's that communicating with? What trends, color trends, style trends, design trends, packaging trends. Also, packaging improves all the time, and that's another way to kind of build in a brand refresh if you change your packaging.
Well, and the small entrepreneur just getting started, they can afford to they can afford to try something to sort of make some mistakes. Hopefully they're not putting too much money into something. I've interviewed so many entrepreneurs that have, navigated and pivoted in their first few years. Then the big companies, they can afford to do, oh, let's do our version of the low carb ice cream, but when it stops to sell, they'll go back to their other things. Whereas that one company that bet millions of dollars on one thing, when that trend reaches its end, they're SOL. You know?
It's hard. Businesses come and go all the time. It's very competitive, and marketing is also competitive. So, being true to your values is a foundation, and a lot of brands, will do that work of what is my brand, what are our values, and then build off of that. And that's really at that core of the thinking about these human values, these things that don't change. Um, and then really communicating, being able to communicate what your brand and product stand for and what benefits it's offering and needs it may be meeting.
Yeah. I'm also thinking of sort of the sensory reaction to food. I remember when I was the R&D chef for Just Desserts, I was working on a coconut cake. I was working on a line of bundt cakes for the year, and I was also working on a PB&J bar. Well, the Latin staff went bonkers for the coconut cake, just the smell
Hmm.
of it coming out of the oven. I remember some of the retail buyers said, "Oh, coconut's divisive." PB&J, the Latins could care less, but the kids that grew up eating PB&J sandwiches like me, we went bonkers for the PB&J. So it's real interesting. And I've always loved coconut, so I loved both. But it's always interesting when you see different target markets' response to food.
Absolutely. That's that comfort. That's that identity in self. If you grew up eating coconut, it's very important to you. If you grew up on peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, for better, for worse, that's also very important to you. And you can kind of see, like when I see a new snack bar that's PB&J, it's like, okay, I know kind of who they're targeting. And when you see something a little more exotic, like a dulce de leche, which I don't know if I've seen a dulce de leche snack bar. Maybe I'm thinking of, cereal bars.
Yeah,
Um, they're targeting a different group. And I think what's fun is going through the store and even trying to imagine, like, who's the target here? Who are they talking to?
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and what are these new benefits?
And you can afford if you're a small regional business, let's say you're doing a food truck or you're doing pop-ups or you're a home-based cottage foods, you can afford to make that target market product and build your clientele from there. Will you grow to brick and mortar? Will you go to multiple locations? We don't know. It might just be a side gig, it might just be something. But I think those are the really niche markets that we see and tapping into with like there's just such a huge world of cottage food businesses, but that's a topic for another day. Kara, I want to just let everyone know that we're going to make sure we have your web address in this when we go live. And thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure.
This has been a delight to speak to you. Of course, I have 20 other questions, but we have to wrap this up. The Food Foundry series is presented to you from Sierra Commons. You can get more information at sierracommons.org. Food Foundry series will be presenting a robust uh, program of innovators, drink makers, entrepreneurs, food scientists, chefs, restaurateurs throughout the coming year. Our next presentation will be on January 28th with financial advisor Miguel Barreras. How to navigate small business loans from non-traditional lenders, meaning not banks. Yes, there are organizations out there lending $5,000 to $100,000 loans for both startups and early stage entrepreneurs. Again, more information at sierracommons.org. It's been a pleasure speaking to you. And please check out our programs for the upcoming year. Our next Food Accelerator 102 starts January 20th. Registrations now open at, yet again, sierracommons.org. Thank you, Kara.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll talk food soon. Bye bye.
Bye.